Well, good evening. We're looking at the continuation of this commentary on 2 Samuel, and we've reached chapter 15. Today's topic is Absalom's conspiracy at Hebron. It came to pass after this, that's after chapter 14, that Absalom prepared his chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. You remember in chapter 14, he's now come back to Jerusalem and he's reunited himself with his father. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. It was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city are you? And he said, Thy servant is one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear you. Absalom said, Moreover, O that I may be judge in the land, that every man that has any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. So he was starting to weave a thread of deception already into the relationships with other people. And it was so that when any man came near to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took it and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel by deception. Absalom then brought a magnificent chariot and chariot horses, and hired 50 men as footmen to run ahead of him. He got up early every morning and went out to the gate of the city. When anyone came to bring a case to the king for trial, Absalom called him over and expressed interest in his problem. He would say, I can see that you have a rightful claim in this matter. It's unfortunate that the king doesn't have anyone to assist him in hearing these cases. I surely wish that I was appointed the judge. Then anyone with a lawsuit could come to me, and I would give him justice. When anyone came to bow to him, Absalom would not let him, but shook his hand, or hugged him and kissed him instead. Now, this is verse 7, and it came to pass after 40 years, that's wrong, it should be 4 years, that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. Now, I make this comment. This is an incorrect translation in the King James Version because King David only reigned a total of 40 years altogether. And he has already been reigning for some time when this event takes place. Other translations correctly state that it is 4 years. So if you've got a King James, go and scrub that out and write 4 years instead. Of course, it says previously in 2 Samuel and also back in 1 Samuel that David reigned over Judah for 7.5 years, and then he reigned for 33 years in Israel, a total of 40.5 years. So he's still ruling, he's already been ruling, so it can't possibly be 40 years because after 40 years he's dead. So we can use logic to work out these mistakes now that the translators back then didn't have that ability to do. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he rose and went to Hebron. After 4 years, as I said, not 40 years, Absalom said to the king, Let me go to Hebron to sacrifice to the Lord in fulfillment of a vow that I made to him, while I was at Geshur, so that if he would bring me back to Jerusalem, I would sacrifice to him. So the king answered and said, All right, go and fulfill your vow. So Absalom went to Hebron. It seems like a legitimate request, with no backstory, but as we will see in the following chapters, God is putting in place the promised threat of the sword within David's own family. But Absalom sent spies throughout all of the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as you hear the trumpet, then you will say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew nothing about what was going on. See, Satan already was working in here. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, where he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. But when Absalom was there in Hebron, he sent spies to every tribe, in every part of Israel, to incite rebellion against the king. And he said in his messengers, as soon as you hear the trumpets, his message read, you will know that Absalom has been crowned in Hebron. He took 200 men from Jerusalem with him as guests, but they were completely in the dark about his real intentions. While he was offering sacrifices to the Lord, he sent for Ahithophel, one of David's counselors who lived in Gilo. Ahithophel declared his support behind Absalom, as did many others. So the conspiracy became very strong against the king. And there came a messenger to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all of his servants that were with him in Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for we shall not escape else from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring down evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. For you. And the king went forth, and all of the people after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house in order. And these people, unfortunately, could have been there and lose their lives, but they didn't. And the king went forth, and all of the people after him, and tarried in that place that was afar off. And all of his servants passed on beside him, and all of the Cherethites, and the Pelethites, and all of the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. A messenger joined and soon arrived at Jerusalem to tell King David the news about Absalom. All of Israel has joined Absalom in a conspiracy against you. Then we must flee at once out of the city, or it will be too late. If we get out of the city before he arrives, both us and the city will be saved. His aide replied, we are with you, therefore, do whatever you think is best. So the king and all of his household set out at once. He took everyone with him, except 10 of his young wives, to keep the palace in order. David paused at the edge of the city to let his troops pass ahead of him, to lead the way. 600 Gittites who had come with David from Gath, and the Cherethites and the Pelethites, which were David's personal bodyguard. Verse 19. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, wherefore goes you also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for you are a stranger and also an exile. Whereas you came but yesterday, should I this day make you go up and down with us, seeing I go whither I may? Return thou and take back thy brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. And Ittai answered the king and said, as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even thou also thy servant shall be. So that is one loyal servant. And David said to Ittai, go and pass over. And Ittai passed over, and all of his men and the little ones with him. So you had 600 families which were loyal to him coming out of Gath. And all of the country wept with a loud voice, and all of the people passed over. The king also himself passed over Brook Kidron, which is the brook in Kidron Valley, and all of the people passed over suddenly the way towards the way of the wilderness. But suddenly the king turned to Ittai, the captain of the 600 Gittites, and said unto him, what are you doing here? Go on back to Jerusalem with your men, to your king, for you are guests in Israel, a foreigner in exile. It seems that only yesterday that you arrived, and now today should I force you to wander with us? For who knows where we will end up? Go on back and take your troops with you, and may the Lord be merciful unto you and to your men. But Ittai replied, I vow by the God of Israel and by your own life, that wherever you go I will go, no matter what happens, whether it means life or death. So David replied, all right then, come with us. Then Ittai and his 600 men and their families went along with David and the rest of Israel. And there was deep sadness throughout the city, as God's chosen king and his retinue were forced to leave the city and pass over the brook Kidron and went into the country towards the wilderness. And lo, Zadok also and all of the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God out of Jerusalem. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all of the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favour in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me both it and its habitation. But if he does say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good unto him. In other words, whatever the Lord wants to do, I'm okay with that. The king said unto Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Are you not a prophet? Return unto the city in peace, and you, your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness, until there comes word from you to certify me. Therefore, it's a conclusion. Zadok therefore and Abiathar carried the ark of God again back into Jerusalem, and they tarried there. Abiathar and Zadok and the Levites took the ark of the covenant and set it down beside the road until everyone had passed. Following David's instructions, Zadok took the ark back into the city once again. If the Lord sees fit, David said, he will bring me back to see the ark and the tabernacle once again. But if he is through with me, if he's withdrawn his favour from me, if he's turned his back on me, well, let him do what he thinks is best for me, for him and his people. Then the king told Zadok, look, here is my plan. Return quietly to the city with your son Ahimaaz and Abiathar's son Jonathan. I will stop at the ford of the Jordan River and wait there for a message from you. Let me know what happens in Jerusalem before I disappear into the wilderness. So Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back into the city and stayed there. And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet and wept as he went up and had his head covered, and he went barefoot, and all of the people with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. And David walked up the road that led to the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went. His head was covered and his feet were bare as a sign of mourning. Now this is a prophetic picture of Jesus going to Calvary. His head covered with a crown of thorns, and his bare feet, a sign of being condemned. And that's 14 generations before Christ was taken to the cross. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, I pray thee turn thy counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. When someone told David that Ahithophel, his advisor, was backing Absalom, David prayed, O Lord, please make Ahithophel give Absalom foolish advice. We see in a later chapter that Ahithophel, who betrays David, hangs himself, just like Judas, who betrayed Jesus to the Pharisees. Again, another prophetical picture. And it came to pass that when David came to the top of the mountain where he worshipped God, behold, Hushi the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If you pass on with me, then you shall be a burden unto me. But if you return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant before me, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. Conclusion. And have you not there with you Zadok and Abiathar the priests? Therefore it shall be that what thing soever you hear out of the king's house, you shall tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send unto me everything that you can hear. So Hushi, David's friend, came back into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. As they reached the spot at the top of the Mount of Olives, where the people worshipped God, David found Hushi the Archite waiting for him, with torn clothes and earth upon his head. But David told him, If you go with me, you will only be a burden. Return to Jerusalem and tell Absalom, I will counsel you, as I did your father. Then you can frustrate and counter any of Ahithophel's advice. Zadok and Abiathar the priests are there. Tell them the plans that are being made to capture me, and they will send their sons, Ahimaaz and Jonathan, to find me and tell me what is going on. So David's friend, Hushi, returned to the city at the risk of his own life, if he gets caught, getting there just as Absalom arrived. So the plot thickens.